If you've checked US political polls recently, you've likely seen that Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is currently leading over incumbent Republican President Donald Trump. Although polling is a current and imperfect snapshot of American political leanings at this point in time, it's still anybody's game as to whether Joe Biden or Donald Trump will win the 2020 election. The results will depend on how well the candidates and their teams can emphasize ideas and strategies which benefit them. So, let's investigate how Donald Trump, who is currently behind in the polls, could potentially win the 2020 election against Joe Biden. Note that the purpose of this video is not to support any one candidate. It is intended to be a nonpartisan investigation of US politics that we can all learn from. So, let's jump right in. First, and likely most important to Trump to do during his time in office, is to create a cohesive strategy for a certain microorganism going around whose name will get us demonetized on YouTube, so I'll just refer to it as the current situation. One of Trump's central strong points going into this election was supposed to be the prosperous American economy, which is no longer present. Towards the end of May 2020, the unemployment rate in the United States was at 13.3%. If this keeps up for the next 6 months, that's the point at which it can officially be called a recession. As soon as that word gets thrown around, Trump's chances at winning the presidential election decline significantly. If we look back to the presidency of George W. Bush, we can see that as the Great Recession officially began in December 2007, Bush's approval rating as president nosedived from the mid-30s all the way down to the mid-20s. That's about a 10% decline in his polling numbers associated with the confirmation of a recession. It doesn't matter whether or not it's the president's fault that the recession happens. There's always a correlation between tough times and disapproval of the administration. So making sure that the national government is responsibly dealing with the current situation is of utmost importance to Trump's re-election team. That being said, it'll be extremely difficult, since this isn't just a national recession, it's predicted to be an international recession, which makes the situation much more complex. So assuming that there's no miracle that can bring the economy back, what can he do to mitigate the damage? That's where the strategy of pivoting comes around. Instead of focusing on being the economic and jobs president, Trump should instead take advantage of another one of the crise's effects, the rally round the flag or rally round the leader effect, is the surge in a political leader's approval ratings during a time of crisis like the current situation. Mentioning George W. Bush again, his approval skyrocketed following 9/11 to around 90% because people at the time agreed with his handling of the situation. If Trump can spin the situation as him helping the American people and present himself as a responsible leader, then he should really see a rise in the polls for a while. This could be aided by presenting more cooperation between Trump and Republican allies on the state level, using the political apparatuses of Republican officials like Governor Mike DeWine from Ohio and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, both Republicans, since photo ops and federal government aid could look good for both of the governors and Trump, since he's being promoted in battleground states such as Ohio and Florida. which are both extremely important going into the 2020 presidential election. Trump could also work on smaller projects with the Democrats. If they work out, then it makes him look bipartisan and statesmanlike, even if the projects don't have a large impact. It's all about the optics. Such deals with the Democrats would benefit him more than the Democrats in the big picture. Okay, assuming that this works out one way or another, then what's the next step for Trump? Focus on digital promotion tools. Given the current situation, it's quite likely that campaign rallies and events will switch to being online, since people can't meet up in large groups. Trump already has an advantage in this department, shown through the following statistics. Twitter followers, Trump, 81.9 million. Biden, 6.1 million. Instagram followers, Trump, 20.3 million. Biden, 2.3 million. YouTube subscribers, Trump, 477,000. Biden, 64.8 thousand. Donald Trump may be ahead, but it can't hurt him if he widens the gap for social media over Biden as significantly as possible. By properly recognizing how the current situation impacts the practice of campaigning, candidates can more effectively promote themselves leading up to the 2020 presidential election. Therefore, focusing on getting a good team centered around social media and digital promotion will be critical to successfully getting an edge against your opposition going into this election. But not all of the initiatives that Trump will need for this election are national. Some of them have to be regionally focused. Where Trump really lags behind is in the Electoral College, since Biden is winning in certain swing states by fractional margins. The 2020 election could effectively be won by a few hundreds of thousands of votes in a few states. This is the Electoral College Map according to recent opinion polls. In the bottom right corner, we can see that the Republicans aren't doing so well in terms of Electoral College votes, but the percentage differences between the Republicans and Democrats is quite small. Take Georgia, for example. That light blue signifies that the Democrats are polling at 46.3%, while the Republicans have 46.0% of the vote. That's 0.3% of the poll determining whether the electors should be assigned to one party or another. So Georgia is clearly a state they need to focus on. Another state that's looking quite susceptible to Republican election efforts is North Carolina, currently polling at 46% Democratic, 45% Republican. By focusing there, he should not only be able to flip another 15 electoral votes, but rebuilds the national morale of the Republican Party, ensuring that the red wall in the Deep South doesn't get breached. That's something Trump will really need to focus on. But that only brings him to 220 electors, so they need more regional initiatives. He still needs a significant bump in the vote count. He has to win Florida. That'll be slightly more difficult. He's down by 3% against Biden. But he was down in Floridian polls going into the 2016 election. It wouldn't be surprising if the Republican Party surpassed voting expectations in that state again. If he successfully does that, the Trump column gains another 29 electors, bringing him up to 249 electors out of the necessary 270. Trump also needs to pull off a similar thing in Pennsylvania. He's currently down by 2 points. But if he can pull off an economic recovery to some extent for the manufacturing sector around the Rust Belt, he should theoretically be able to take Pennsylvania, which is another 20 points, which brings both of the parties to 269, a tied electoral college. So what else does he need to win to break that tie? we'd recommend targeting Arizona. It voted red in the 2016 election, and despite a Republican deficit of 3% of the polls in Arizona, Trump could potentially sway it, taking him to 280 electors and a second term in office. Admittedly, some of these regional focuses do seem like long shots, but the political landscape in the United States is constantly changing. You can't really know what's around the next corner. But besides those regional initiatives and focusing on those specific states, there is one last crucial thing that Donald Trump needs to do in order to defeat Joe Biden in the 2020 American presidential election. Bolster enthusiasm as much as possible in areas where he has a large or moderate lead, including in rural and suburban regions. One of Donald Trump's crucial competitive edges is that his base is much more enthusiastic than that of Joe Biden. Time and time again, it's been proven by polling that the Democratic base is not as fired up for Biden as the Republicans are for Trump. Both in 2016 and 2020 polls, this is the case. Assuming that Trump remains just as polarizing as ever politically, he needs to drive out the vote as much as possible for his base in swing states, making sure that he's winning with 80 to 90% of the vote in safe rural counties, so that he drives up the total vote count throughout the state. But he still has to compete and work on a political strategy for the suburbs, in capturing at least some moderates while making sure as many people as possible in his base in those regions go out to vote. If he successfully does this, the regional state flipping strategy just might work. That's what Donald Trump needs to do if he wants to get reelected and remain President of the United States of America. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and liking. I really do recommend you do those. And we also have further readings down in the description which you might find interesting. Have a great day. Bye!